The trade market chaos officially continues. Ja Morant trades are being discussed, and apparently the Memphis Grizzlies are open to trading their talented point guard. The Wolves and the Kings are circling Ja Morant on top of that, and the Warriors are starting to lose leverage on the Jonathan Kuminga trade. And now Anthony Davis also suffered ligament damage that could leave him out for a number of months, which may affect his trade value. It should. We're going to talk about all that and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. So this one was announced a couple of hours ago. Anthony Davis has sustained ligament damage in his left hand and could be ruled out at least through February 5th trade deadline. Davis will seek a second opinion on whether he needs surgery, which would mean he would miss even additional time than the current 6-week timeline. Davis suffered the injury in Thursday's game. That one come from Shams, who reported this. And this just goes back to exactly what people are concerned about if it comes down to trading for Anthony Davis. It is always something. It's not just lower body injuries. It's always something. And I get it. It's not in his control. He's not going out there trying to play injured. He's just an injury-prone player. And when you look at him, next year he's due $58.5 million, and he has a player option for $62 million in the 2027-28 season. In an era where teams are worried about the second tax apron, that is a huge risk for them to trade for the contract of Anthony Davis, considering what his injury history has been over the course of his career. There is no doubt that when Anthony Davis is on the basketball court, he plays like an all-star. But the biggest question, or one of the best abilities, is availability, right? And I know that's an old adage, but it's real, especially when it comes to a player like Anthony Davis. So now hearing that Anthony Davis could be out up to a couple of months or more, depending on if he needs surgery, that is going to be or that's going to take away a lot of teams and their possibility of being interested in Anthony Davis. You know, we talked yesterday that the Atlanta Hawks were a team that after trading Trae Young, they could pivot back to Anthony Davis. Now look at that, right? They're already dealing with something with Kristaps Porzingis and his, thing that he has going on. Now you look at this Anthony Davis situation. I'm sure this may have scared off any team, at least this season, that could have been interested in trading for Anthony Davis. And that is just the Anthony Davis experience, unfortunately, and it does not seem like that's going to stop anytime soon. So, this leads back to what the future is going to hold for AD. Like, he's undoubtedly talented, and that's one of the things that's so frustrated about this, because you look at the skill set, the two-way ability of Anthony Davis, the rim protection that Anthony Davis brings, all this stuff is legitimate, and it could be a weapon that most teams could absolutely use. But unfortunately, you don't want to have a $60 million bench piece on your team that is just an ornament on your bench that's hurt more than he plays. And that's just the reality of it. He's going to be making more money, more millions than games played, and that's a problem, right? So, overall, it's a huge issue here, and this just goes to show exactly why teams are concerned about trading for Anthony Davis. It's the 1-2. It's the contract and the injury proneness. Those two things, they overlap. It's not going to leave a lot of teams interested in Anthony Davis potentially. The dude just can't stay healthy. But I'd love to hear from you guys on this one. Hearing this news from Anthony Davis, would you still trade for him? Knowing that once he's on the basketball court, he can be an absolute weapon, would you still trade for Anthony Davis? Or, like many teams, hearing this injury thing, does that make you a little bit less interested in Anthony Davis? Let me know that down below. With that said, let's get to another report from Shams. The Grizzlies are beginning to seriously consider trading Ja Morant. This one comes from Shams Charania, who reported this earlier today. And this kind of makes sense, right? We've heard little rumblings about the potential of them moving on from Ja Morant. Reportedly they're weighing the options of building the team around Jaren Jackson Jr., which, he has his own injury stuff sometimes as well, the foul trouble, but he is a defensive player of the year candidate, things like that. So, Ja's, it's just so interesting, I guess to call it the fall of Ja Morant, right? Like, you look at where this the Memphis Grizzlies overall, you look at where and how you viewed them 3-4 years ago. The Memphis Grizzlies was viewed as a team that was on the uprise, that probably that was, ideally going to be competing for the Western Conference Finals, or at least being a major factor in the Western Conference for years. And then between Ja Morant's suspension, injuries, all that type of stuff, now the trade of Desmond Bane, this is a roster that is really in a franchise that really is in disarray and doesn't know exactly what the next steps are going to be for Ja Morant. So we're going to talk about the teams that reportedly could be interested in Ja, which a number of teams should be. But, Ja is just, you need a certain situation for Ja. And, he is a player that he's a damn good basketball player. No doubt about it. Does he make some mistakes? 3-point shooting percentage is a little bit shaky for him this year, all that type of stuff. But this is still a guy who ultimately is a very talented player. Injury prone, maybe, if you want to start giving him that title. But, he's averaging 19 points per game this year. This is the first time since his second year in the league that he's averaging less than 20 points per game. He's shooting the ball 40% from three and 40% from the field and 20% from the three-point line. Now, is some of that the offense that's there? Yeah. Could some of it be just him being unhappy? Yeah, it could be as well. But overall, right now, you look at the whole Ja Morant saga and how that's gone with this team. It sucks because Ja, is very talented. And so now with the Grizzlies, seriously considering and discussing the idea of trading Ja Morant, what does that mean for this team? Reportedly, again, according to Shams, the Grizzlies will evaluate all options presented to them between now and the February 5th trade deadline involving Morant. This would be yet another monumental roster change in Memphis as executive Zach Kleiman and his front office traded key starter Desmond Bane to Orlando Magic in June for 4 unprotected first-round picks, a future first-round pick swap, and KCP. They did also draft Cedric Howard, who is actually one of the best rookies in this draft class. But, we've heard that, when we heard LaMelo and Trey and Ja, all these point guards could be available at the trade deadline, we now know that Trae Young has been traded. It's been kind of quiet on LaMelo Ball, but now Ja Morant, and they could seriously consider doing that. And reportedly, there are a number of teams that are interested in Ja Morant, which gets us to our next topic. The Heat and Timberwolves are teams that immediately are interested in potentially trading for Ja Morant. This one comes from Brett Siegel, who says this: keep a very close eye on Minnesota and Sacramento for Morant. If Miami wants to make an all-in move, this would be it. Those are the 3 teams immediately coming to mind for a possible Ja Morant trade. So, Ja Morant was the second overall pick in the 2019 draft, a very talented player, no doubt about that. And you look at those 3 teams, Minnesota, who absolutely needs a point guard, right? And, pairing Ja Morant with Anthony Edwards, what could that look like as a backcourt, right? That's very enticing. For the Miami Heat, there's a team that's always looking for, to trade for talent. The question is, does Heat culture help kind of fix some of the things? Does Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, do they feel that the culture that they've created there is going to insulate Ja Morant and maybe help him focus on basketball like he needs to? Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in the league. And I tend to believe, or I tend to trust whatever Eric Spoelstra sees. And if he's in on a Ja Morant trade, it makes sense, right? And then you look at I talked about the Heat, we talked about the Minnesota, and then Sacramento. Sacramento is one of those teams that they just want something, right? They're willing to trade for anything at this point in time. Would they want to keep Sabonis and then pair Ja Morant with Sabonis to replace De'Aaron Fox with Sabonis? Maybe that definitely could be something that they could be interested in for sure. But it's still questions there on what the Kings could really offer. But you look at Minnesota, you look at the Miami Heat. Those are 2 teams that I think that they have the rosters to where if they get Ja Morant, they go right back. To being very competitive. The Minnesota Timberwolves are already a competitive team. The Miami Heat, they're kind of, they're 5-5 in their last 10. So, but they're in the Eastern Conference. You pair Ja Morant with Bam. You got Khalil Ware there as well. I'm sure Tyler Hero will probably be part of that move. You still have Davion Mitchell. They have some players that would be very, very interesting, right? When it comes down to it. So these teams being interested in it, it could be fun, right? And apparently, the Memphis Grizzlies are prioritizing youth and trying to build around Jaren Jackson Jr., and that all makes sense for this team. So, we'll see what happens there. My bet, I would love to see Ja Morant in Minnesota with Anthony Edwards. I think that, not to say that necessarily they automatically become a favorite in the West or anything like that, but I do think that's instantly a team that you got to look at and say, hey, if this backcourt works, if Anthony Edwards, who has turned into a really good facilitator, a really good shooter, if him and Ja Morant can work, depending on what you keep there, Rudy Gobert is probably still going to be there. We'll see what other pieces they're able to keep in that move. But if that's the case and that's what they end up doing, I like that for them. So, these are teams to watch out for, but it just goes to highlight that there's going to be a lot of willing and dealing at this trade deadline. I talked about that a little bit yesterday. We also heard as well that Ja Morant is not over his suspension, which could be leading to all this trade chaos and stuff like that. This comes from Michael C. Wright of ESPN, who reported that Morant has not gotten over the suspension that had left him feeling alienated by teammates. It even led to Morant saying outside of the team that he isn't playing for Memphis anymore. So, I mean, there's clearly some feelings there going on in Memphis because of how things have gone. The team probably feels away. Ja Morant probably feels away. But if you have a player that's feeling alienated from the franchise or from his teammates, I mean, you got to kind of do what's best for your roster. And that's where they sit in right now. So we'll see what happens there with Ja Morant. And ultimately, like I said, I would love to see Ja Morant be with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I would not be surprised if he lands with the Heat. It really comes down to what package the Memphis Grizzlies end up prioritizing. With that said, let's get into the draft mate of Ja Morant, and that is Zion Williams. It's been a lot reported on what the Pelicans could do. Reportedly, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson could all be available at the trade deadline, and all those teams could help players in different ways. Well, now it's been reported from Sam Amick of The Athletic that the Pelicans will not entertain Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, or Herb Jones trades. Now, this is something I've talked a lot about, right? Like, I did think that the Pelicans were in a really good place to kind of mix up their roster some. They have new young players in Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen that make that they could start building a different kind of gear towards and see what players fit in that. Now, with that said, they don't have to make that decision now. Zion Williams is locked into a contract into the 27-28 season. Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, those guys are locked in. So, they don't have to make a decision right now. But with the Pelicans not owning their own 2026 first-round pick after trading for Derek Queen, it did make some sense hearing that they wanted to recoup some of those draft assets and maybe use one of those players to do so. But now it seems like none of that's on the line. They are not trading. They have no intention of trading any of those players. We've heard that before and then still seeing trades that happen. It's still about a month until the February 5th trade down and see how things change at that point. But as it stands right now, that rebuild that has been talked about, has been rumored, of the Pelicans rebuilding around Queen and Fears, it seems like they're going to kick that a little bit further. And listen, Zion's been playing great, right? And so, they have the opt-out as well, so they still have the flexibility if they decide to do something later down the road. And it makes sense to maybe see, hey, let's give this core the end of the season. Let's see what changes and how they grow and develop together as a unit in the offseason. And then we can make that decision next February in 2027, depending on seeing on what pieces kind of fit together, what pieces don't. And then we can make that alteration. And that makes sense. You don't have to make every move right now. You got some time in the NBA, and so that's what it seems like the Pelicans are doing. They're using this time to evaluate before they make a decision on any type of long-term fit or not, and I think that's the smartest decision for them. With that said, let's get into the last topic for today. The Warriors and Kings are expected to resume Jonathan Kuminga trade talk discussions, and this is something that we heard in the offseason. Reportedly, the Kings offered Malik Monk. The Warriors didn't have an interest at that point in time, even though I thought at that time it was a good deal. Now it seems like with January 15th, only 6 days away, that's when Jonathan Kuminga could be traded. I've already said Jonathan Kuminga is probably if you're betting on any player to be moved and you want a safe bet, Jonathan Kuminga is the safe bet on a player to be moved. All the writing's on the wall for that. Jonathan Kuminga is probably not going to, not probably, he is not part of that team's future plans at all. He will be moved. The question is what team is going to be moved? And reported to this one comes from Sam Amick as well. A third team is likely to be required to complete a deal because the Warriors have shown no interest in Sacramento's available veterans. The Kings offered a protected 2030 first-round pick and Malik Monk in the summer sign-and trade attempt, but the league sources said the first-round pick is no longer in play. The shift represents a crucial loss in leverage for Golden State as Kuminga's diminished role and strained relationship with Kerr have become more apparent. The Warriors' bargaining position has weakened significantly since summer negotiations. I mean, hey, that's why yesterday's price is not today's price, and that goes with NBA trades as well. So that's what it comes down to. Like, Jonathan Kuminga is out of the rotation. It's hard when you're not featuring a player to then ask for some type of crazy deal back for them, and that's what the Warriors are finding themselves in right now with Jonathan Kuminga. I still think he'll be moved regardless. And it just comes down to what then third team is involved and what do they get back from that third team, because do they still want a big? Are they looking for more defense? Are they looking for more shooting? Buddy Hield is having a bad three-point shooting season so far. So they look at that case of it. The Warriors are still a team that really do want to make a significant move. Reportedly, they don't want to move Dre. They don't want to move Jimmy Butler. And so thus, Jonathan Kuminga is their biggest trade chip. If they've already lost leverage with that trade chip, it doesn't paint a really good outlook for them to make a big splash at this trade deadline. But hey, where do things have happened? We'll see if they can pull something out from out their sleeve, and we shall see. But let me know what you guys think on all of that down below. That's going to do it for today's episode, man. But I want to hear from you guys. Do you think that Memphis will actually trade Ja Morant at this trade deadline? Does Anthony Davis' injury officially take him off the market? And should the Warriors just move on from Jonathan Kuminga or wait until the offseason? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel as well. You guys can follow us at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making an episode. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.